why is this persona required in this problem statement that we are talking about, or even the vision statement? Or the other thought is, how did we identify this user persona requirement, right? I need to do that user persona in this statement because there was some vision that we had to have just to know more about or empathize with the users, right? That's why what is the reasoning, right? If we mention that thing, automatically the other person who is looking at it, the hiring manager, will get to know that okay, this person knows what to do and when to do, right? Today I'm going to talk about this was again because of the feedback that we have received, that how to even apply those principles that we talked about in the last session, right? So it's like a deep dive session. So this is like a quick introduction, but if we look at the earlier thing what we have talked, a UX portfolio is something that we create, like an artifact that we create for focus towards getting a job, right? And it is more towards a hiring manager who is looking for a candidate, right? And we have talked about like what makes or breaks the portfolio, right? What or it scales up. So if we look at those three things, those are visual presentation skills, problem solving skills, and the connectivity and relatability of artifacts, what primarily an hiring manager is looking for. And we actually got only very less time, that is 30 seconds, to grasp his attention. Now if we look at the same thing with personas, right, we have seen like what are different kind of personas available and what were the problems. So there were things which were lacking, like visual presentation skills were lacking, and even problem solving skills, at least one or more were lacking in these kind of examples which we have gone through, right? Now if you look at the factors that we considered, like, or these were the factors that we considered that it is important for us portfolio to stand out, and these are the things which in order that we have to do in order to achieve those things, like prioritizing the information which we have done as a part of our exercise or a design exercise that we have done, and then we prioritizing our skills what we want to showcase, and also enhancing them with few visual treats, right? Now if you look at what pointers we discussed last time, so for prioritizing of information, there should be a strong storyline that demands any specific artifact to be there, not only a uh, user persona, but any of the artifact, right? And why reasoning should be there, like why should we have a persona in our, or why should we consider that a persona is required in our problem statement, and what were the outcomes derived from the problem state from the persona exercise, right? So those were the prioritized part of information that a person is looking at, that a hiring manager is looking at. And whereas when coming to showcasing skills, what are our strongest skills, right? And why is it like necessary to actually execute an artifact in such a way? And also what were the interesting observations that were there? So these points will again drive interest for a person while looking at it. And if these are really scannable, and the key decisions which, if they are really scannable, right, then it automatically enhances the portfolio. Now let's focus on one thing, like how to prioritize information, because the other two things are more towards like, if a storyline is the strongest part or foundation, the other two skills will complement it, and then it will make even more better artifact or a portfolio. So we will be concentrating more on how to prioritize information, what is the importance of the storyline, and how to frame, or not how to frame, how to include all these details into it, right? Now if you look at the storyline of a portfolio, what do we generally have, or what do we generally do? So we actually try to make a human connection, right, with whatever the problem we are solving for, and the connection is between our portfolio and the hiring manager, right? And we try to set up a context of about what problem did we solve, and we try to make all the things memorable such that the person remembers these things, and once he identifies and he remembers these things, and also creating that impact or demonstrating that impact using all these things, right? This is what the storyline actually helps us building when doing a portfolio. Now if you look at the components of the portfolio, right, in general these are the approach that everyone would follow. There will be a problem statement, there will be some research methodology that they have done, either user interviews or some surveys. They may include insights what were there, or they may not include, and then from insights they directly jump into what personas we have created, right? And in personas also there are very limited details of demographics and what problems are they facing, or what are the, what can we say, what are the more challenges that they are facing, right? And then there will be journey maps, there may or may not, and there will be rough sketches, low fidelity wireframes and high fidelity wireframes, right? And there will be an interesting style guide of color choices and all, and there will be visual mockups. Now, if you look at all these structure, right? So if we focus on what are the or the hiring manager looking for, so it is really hard to read between the lines of what is happening in your project without a concrete storyline, right? Whether if we follow another approach where we have a vision statement, right, that you are going to solve, and that's a vision statement, not a problem statement. And then we try to define these questions, or we try to include all the content what will be created using these questions, like what is the problem, why is the problem. I think this is what the framework even Prasad sir mentions, but this is like a steps to follow, like what to include in a sequence. This sequence can change based on your storyline, but to create a specific storyline, these are the building blocks, right? Now if you look at how would this drastically change, so here is a sample of my portfolio which I have done earlier. And if you look at these things, right, my title slide is more towards, it says it's an insurance dashboard, and it just says how am I doing it. And I have included everything. Like I have included my user personas, I have included my workflows, I have included wireframes, I've included what I have done, everything like in this contact slide, right? So execution approach, then business journey and all. Now this becomes a more like a what do we say, library of things, but it is not being focused. Like what is happening is not being communicated, and that prioritized information of what hiring manager is looking for is not being reflected, right? Whereas if you look at the portfolio that I've done using the second approach, right, now there is a vision statement what I am doing for in the same project. So it's more like reducing the rejection rates of insurance management. Now I have created a different set of artifacts using journey map and the user personas. I try to create an ecosystem map, which you can see on the right top, right? And it highlights what is the important information or where there are failures and all. And there is a comparison map of workflows, how hard is it to do. And there is a flow chart kind of thing where we are actually describing what causes the problem, how deep depth, and what is the complexity of it, right? When a storyline is faced, so I wanted to focus on like how complex it is, and then how did I solve it. So that's where these kind of new artifacts have been created using my existing artifacts just to complement the whole thing, whole storyline, right? Now if you look at general examples, like what is happening using storyline, we all know how an iPhone was launched, right? And how that storytelling was amazing, and how can we relate it to it. So first, initially Steve Jobs started with like they're launching three new products, or and then it was like one iPod with a full screen, and there is a phone, and there is an internet communicator what they wanted to watch, and they created a drama around it. And once they started, okay, they are not launching three things, they are launching only one device which supports all these things. That's where he made a one big statement, which is like Apple reinvents the phone, right? There was a vision statement there. And then he started explaining, he showed one slight example of what iPhone looks like, but that was just to walk through it. But if you look at the next part of it, right, there was storytelling, or there was explanation of a problem. So he explained how these keypads were creating problems, or if they ship any new products, then there are no new buttons to add, right? That's where the bigger problem is, and which is what they try to focus on again, showcasing one more vision statement about this product, like how design complements this product, like something wonderful in hand. Then they launched the features, and they started talking about those features, what it is multi-screen, how does the device overall would look like, right? So there was a kind of sequence that was followed in even in his presentation. So it's a similar way. If you look at it, there was a vision statement, then there was what it is doing, then there was explaining or empathy about creating about the problem, what is the problem, why is the problem and all, and there was a solution what they are focusing on, and then he connected how this solution is actually solving these problems what he have defined, right? It's the same circle of storyline. it always reflects in any of the marketing. If we see it, if we see any of the commercials, right, it is almost 1 minute or 1.5 minute long commercial in any of an ad. Let's say in Indian context, if we take Tide example or any aerial example. So there is a kid who makes his clothes dirty, and then Ariel provides a solution that no, we have your back, and this can remove those hard stains. In some cases, they'll show how hard stains are there, right? So it's always this kind of framework where we explain, and it actually works. Now, if you look these contextual things, with is all the contextual thing that we have discussed, like how and what problem to include, if we translate the same things into user personas, right? So user personas generally have these components, right? We have user groups, we have demographic details, we frame user needs, user core problems, and then we derive outcomes. And also we do it think, feel, say, and do just to empathize these things. But slightly, if we ask a different question, we already have all these things. There is, I mean, it's not negotiable, right? We actually have to do these things when you are creating user personas. But how to communicate that you have done a user persona, right? So it's not straightforward. It's not a sequence. We have to follow. I mean, we have to follow the same thing. What was the problem? Why is the problem? Now, if you look at a different approach, right? So the same things. Why is this persona required in this problem statement that we are talking about, or even the vision statement? Or the other thought is, how did we identify that this user persona requirement, right? I need to do that user persona in this statement because there was some vision that we had to have just to know more about or empathize with the users, right? That's why what is the reasoning, right? If we mention that thing, automatically the other person who is looking at it, the hiring manager, will get to know that okay, this person knows what to do and when to do, right? And if you look at the outcomes defined, so what are the outcomes that are defined using the persona, and what decisions did we make using those persona? I mean, there can be so many things, right? So let's say we have identified in a use case, we have identified that this app should be more focused towards iPhone users or something like that, right? So there are apps which are focused towards only iOS because of these reasons, right? Because they can trade off for the first release of iOS and they can later release in Android. So that's where even from the end goal of the outcome, these things, how we are connecting these things really matter. Right now, if we look at the same persona, there was a problem statement which we have done in intensive, right? It is more focused towards like people facing difficulties to find rental homes, and those are mainly towards like broker coordinations and even few of the incorrect informations, right? There is these two main problems which are dealing with. Now, if the ask is to design an application where users can find these houses. Now, if you look at doing a persona for this thing, right? We could actually do it like an approach one. We could define who are the bigger user groups, what are the demographics, right? And what are the needs, core problems, and all in a thing, and we put it as it is in our portfolio. But if we slightly think about prioritizing the information based on our main goal, that's where we could communicate, right? Who are our primary users and why are they involved? And why did you consider these key demographics, right? We can mention those things and why component. And we could actually prioritize what are the core needs for each persona. If you are actually, there can be 2 or 3 different softwares you have to design for one problem statement. But if it is only one, then we could focus on like for tenants, these are the core problems and these are the outcomes defined for those things. And you could add that justification for it, right? So why did you do user personas? To identify the interconnected experiences, right? So if a tenant does this thing, so what does a owner do? Or if a owner does this thing, what does a tenant do? So those kind of cross connections we need to identify when we are solving this problem, which is why the groups are more important, right? And why the user needs, right? As the problem statement told, that find a rental property as per the requirements, right? And what are the requirements? That's where the user needs come into place, right? What details to include such that the user needs are met. And also if there are any of the few trade-offs that you have done, like tech-savvy users were deprioritized, which is why this decision will communicate that or set a context to the hiring manager that there are no extraordinary uh, gimmicks or maybe features that are coming into place. It's just a normal flow, right? These kind of information, if you prioritize and communicate, then automatically like your user persona will be your need to user persona will be suffice even without showing that whole documentation that you have done, right? And again, this is just an idealistic approach where user persona is needed in the problem statement or in a portfolio. But whereas if it is not needed, then you can actually combine or create a set of new artifacts all together just to communicate this component, your skill component and all. And once you have nailed this down, the prioritization component doing small stuffs, right? The other components of what we had done, like how to showcase our skills and how to visually enhance them, will fall into place. So how to showcase your skills? So let's say we have done user personas, we have followed the same framework what an idealistically we follow, right? User personas, journey maps and all. Now let's look at if we are applying for a researcher's job, then our more focus is to, if you have done research or if you have done some desk research, right, to showcase those things. That's how we prioritize our components and frame our storyline. Let's say if you are applying for user research jobs, that's where your storyline is like how did you actually discover, or what problem statement, how did you discover a research goal, and what were your research goals? So those kind of storyline would come up. Whereas if it is an interaction design, it's totally different, right? You could trade off your research. You could come into how did you identify your need for user personas, and how did you execute those things? What were the sequence of steps? And you follow the same um, framework, or what was the problem, why was the problem, right? So based on your roles, what you're applying or what your interests is, this can be actually optimized, which is why this is like an idealistic thing that have been derived from it. And you can modify it. There is no such thing like a specific template that we could actually follow and just quickly fill those details, right? But this kind of details or this kind of thought process will enhance that mindset of how can I create a new or maybe differentiating portfolio which will be more interesting for the hiring manager. So I mean, if you follow these small things, that's where your portfolio will be enhanced. Even your user personas will be enhanced there. And it is not a set of whole new document. It's just focused details that you can actually talk about it in your portfolio when you are sharing it across with your hiring manager. Right?